Each spring, the Maryland General Assembly sings a familiar tune about education. This is the year of fixes, reforms, and a renewed focus on classrooms. This session is no different. Lawmakers are debating cell phone bans, artificial intelligence guidance, safety mandates, and a range of other policies that seem reasonable in isolation. Collectively, however, this growing stack of bills tells us something else. Maryland does not have a problem with a lack of ideas. It has a problem with overextension of a system so large, so centralized, and so detached from daily classroom reality that lawmakers are forced to intervene with patchwork solutions. This is not accidental. It is the predictable outcome of the blueprint for Maryland's future. When the blueprint passed in 2020, supporters promised transformation. With enough money, enough planning, and enough state oversight, Maryland schools would become national models. I believe the phrase was world-class. Critics, including me, warned that the plan was too ambitious, too bureaucratic, and fiscally unsustainable. More government, we said, would not necessarily produce better instruction, and once enacted, the blueprint would be impossible to come back from. 6 years later, the warning signs are no longer signs, they are real. Academic outcomes remain basically unchanged. Chronic absenteeism surged after the pandemic and has not fully recovered. Discipline problems have escalated, particularly at the secondary level. Teacher burnout continues to drive experienced educators out of the profession. But rather than scaling back or reassessing, the state continues full steam ahead with more rules, more reporting requirements, and more legislative fixes. So much so that the initial focus and goals of the blueprint have become diluted. That is the story of this year's education agenda. Consider the attitude lawmakers now take toward schools. Instead of trusting local leaders, the General Assembly increasingly legislates behavior. This includes when students can use their phones, how teachers should approach AI, and what devices must be kept on hand for emergencies. These policies may be well-intentioned, but they demonstrate how far policymaking has drifted from day-to-day school life. The state designed a massive, centralized education overhaul. Now it finds itself managing the friction that overhaul created. This pattern is clearest in the growing number of bills that attempt to regulate classroom order. Cell phone bans are a popular example. Nearly everyone agrees smartphones are a distraction, but legislation can mandate rules. It cannot enforce them. Enforcement falls on teachers already asked to do more with less authority in classrooms where disciplinary consequences have been steadily diluted. What looks simple in theory becomes messy in practice, and lawmakers know it. Many of these bills quietly limit consequences or shift enforcement. It is symbolic governance. They pass the laws and refuse to even acknowledge the enforcement of them. The same dynamic appears in the approach to artificial intelligence. After years of silence, the state is finally responding. If lawmakers sound late to the conversation on artificial intelligence in schools, it's because they are. AI is not emerging. It has already changed how students complete assignments, how teachers assess work, and how districts monitor safety. Detection software, automated grading, and chat tools are already embedded. They are often developed quietly, inconsistently, and without training. Much of the debate treats AI as something schools must be protected from, rather than a tool schools must learn to use well. Bills emphasize guidelines, oversight, and coordinators. These are just more political mechanisms that avoid the harder work, rethinking instruction. When assignments can be completed by a chatbot in seconds, the problem is not the technology. The problem is the task. Systems built around compliance and surface-level responses were always vulnerable to automation. AI simply revealed this more quickly. The correct response is not prohibition or policing. It is changes in instructional practices. Teachers need space to design work that assumes AI is present. That means assignments that require judgment, synthesis, and explanation. Work where AI assists, but cannot substitute for thinking. This is already happening informally. Experienced educators are asking students to critique AI outputs and refine prompts. AI becomes a tool that accelerates learning. What is missing is support for that kind of teaching. Instead, the state's approach risks turning AI into another compliance exercise. Meanwhile, teachers navigating curriculum mandates, testing pressure, and staffing shortages are left to figure it out on their own. Large, centralized initiatives make big promises but struggle with speed. By the time guidance is issued, classroom practice has already moved on. AI moves faster than government. Schools know this. Students certainly do. The danger is focusing on detection rather than usefulness. A more realistic approach acknowledges three truths. AI is already here, policy-based bans will fail, and the only sustainable path is instructional. That requires investment, not in bureaucracy, but in training that respects teacher professionalism and freedom to experiment. AI exposes the tension in Maryland's agenda. The state wants transformation without trusting those closest to the work. It wants results now from slow systems. The AI bill is indicative of the blueprint. Big plans leave little room for adaptability, so each new friction point produces another legislative patch. There are exceptions. One bill would require airway clearing devices for choking emergencies. Unlike other mandates, this proposal is narrow and practical. That contrast is instructive. Maryland's biggest challenges are not solved by expanding patchworks. They are solved by professional judgment and local authority. The blueprint promised clarity through centralization. Instead, it delivered persistent intervention and a legislature involved in matters it isn't qualified to manage. The question is no longer whether education needs reform. It is whether the state will admit that reform pushed too far and too fast creates the problems they now scramble to fix. Cell phone bans, AI bills, and safety mandates are not signs of progress. They are signs of patchwork. Lawmakers are stepping deeper into operational details. What began as a promise of transformation has evolved into a cycle of legislative patchwork, disconnected from classroom reality. Maryland doesn't need mandates from Annapolis. It needs restraint, clarity, and trust in the people closest to students. Sustainable reform comes from simplifying policy and restoring authority. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if you value honest insight, subscribe to K-12 USA.